Imagine sitting in a Mustang cockpit, engine screaming, a sky alive with contrails, your eyes scanning for a target that can outrun anything you've ever faced. It's early 1945, and Germany's latest weapon dominates the European skies, the Messerschmitt Me 262. Jets streak past at speeds that make piston fighters look like gliders. Allied pilots have no illusions. Meeting one in dogfight meant near certain death. Yet, here you are, circling the airfield at dawn, waiting. Your briefing warned, don't chase. Don't dive recklessly. The Me-262's acceleration is lethal. But the intelligence reports promised an opening. The jet is fast, yes, but only while airborne. On takeoff, fully loaded with fuel and bombs, it's vulnerable, sluggish, a steel predator temporarily grounded. The sun glints off the jets parked on the tarmac, each Me-262 a sleek dagger of technology. You can almost hear the whine of the engines that will scream to life in minutes. A ground crew scurries beneath them. The jets are beauty and terror combined. Sharp wings, nose-mounted cannons, jet intakes that promise speed beyond imagination. To an Allied pilot, it's breathtaking and terrifying. You grip your controls, calculating timing down to seconds. One wrong move, and the jets lift off before you can engage. Your squadron leader nods. No hesitation, no doubt, just the cold understanding that history is about to be written in the air above these runways. You push the throttle, heart pounding, and for the first time, you feel that mix of fear and anticipation that defines every air battle. The predator becomes prey, but only for a fleeting window. Meanwhile, in the hangars and barracks, German pilots prepare. They joke, exchange last-minute words of bravado. The Americans will never touch us at this speed, one says. They are unaware of the waiting Mustangs, perched like hunters, calculating the perfect moment to strike. Technology promised invincibility, but strategy and timing, the human element, threaten to overturn it. In the next few minutes, the sky above Europe will witness something unprecedented. Jets that once symbolized untouchable air superiority will be confronted by piston fighters in a deadly game of patience, precision, and nerves. Explosions, maneuvers, and daring calculated risks will define the outcome. And for every pilot, the choice is clear: mastery of your machine, timing your attack perfectly, or pay the ultimate price. You will see the Me-262 as more than metal and speed. You will understand it as a catalyst for tactical evolution. Its presence forced the Allies to innovate, adapt, and exploit every vulnerability, turning what seemed invincible into a fleeting opportunity for survival and victory. And it all begins here, on the runway, before the first jet screeches into the sky. By early 1945, the Luftwaffe's skies were dominated by a new, terrifying presence: the Me-262 jet fighter. Unlike any aircraft the Allies had faced, the 262 was fast, sleek, and armed with devastating 30mm cannons capable of shredding bombers in seconds. Pilots called it the Schwalbe, the Swallow, but for the men flying P-51 Mustangs, it might as well have been a flying bullet with a mind of its own. The Allies quickly realized that conventional dogfighting tactics were almost useless. Chasing in Me-262 meant engaging a machine that could out-accelerate, out-climb, and outgun nearly everything in their arsenal. Yet despite its speed, the Me-262 was not invincible. It had weaknesses, many stemming from its early jet engines, which were fragile and slow to spool up. Takeoff and landing were the most perilous moments for its pilots. Fully loaded with fuel and armaments, the jets could barely gain altitude quickly, and the engines were prone to failure if pushed too hard. The Allies, through reconnaissance and intelligence, understood this vulnerability. What seemed untouchable in the air was exposed on the ground and in the initial seconds of flight. Allied intelligence, interrogations of captured pilots, and photographic reconnaissance painted a clear picture. Me-262s were deadly once airborne, but predictable when departing from airfields. Allied commanders devised a strategy: wait for the jets at takeoff, intercept them before they could exploit their speed advantage, and hit hard before they had the chance to climb and maneuver. Timing, patience, and coordination would replace raw speed as the decisive factor. The terrain of the war had changed dramatically. By 1945, the Allies controlled much of France and the Low Countries. German airfields were within striking range, often poorly defended against fast-moving fighter squadrons. Mustang units began to circle these airfields at low altitude, scanning for the telltale signs of jet departures. Ground crews moving, engine spools warming, jet intakes glowing with heat. The pilots had to calculate exact windows. Too early, and the jets hadn't started. Too late, and they'd vanish into the sky, untouchable once more. The psychological element was immense. Allied pilots faced incredible stress waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Me-262's reputation was formidable, and rumor inflated every encounter. Pilots had to suppress fear, maintain focus, and trust in their squadron's coordination. Every sortie combined patience with sudden bursts of decisive action. Meanwhile, German pilots, aware of Allied interception attempts, were trained to expedite takeoffs, sometimes sacrificing safety or maintenance to avoid ambush. It was a deadly chess game in the air. Strategy and timing often mattered more than raw aerial skill. Mechanically, the Me-262's engines, Junkers Jumo 004, posed significant challenges. Fragile turbines required careful throttle management. Misjudgment could destroy the engine mid-flight. Landing gear was heavy and slow to retract, further exposing vulnerability during takeoff. These mechanical limitations, combined with Allied intelligence, allowed Mustangs to exploit the very technology that made the Me-262 feared. The war became a contest not just of speed, but of precision, timing, and understanding of engineering constraints. At the squadron level, planning was meticulous. Mustang units coordinated with reconnaissance and intelligence officers to identify jet bases, determine average sortie times, and assign patrol altitudes. Pilots were briefed with photographs, diagrams of airfield layouts, and simulations of likely takeoff patterns. Every detail mattered: wind direction, sun angle, runway orientation, all could determine success or failure. One miscalculation could result in a missed interception, or worse, a deadly encounter with a fully accelerated jet. The stakes were immense. Me-262s, though numerically limited, threatened the Allied bombing campaign. They could intercept bombers with impunity, potentially altering the strategic air war over Germany. Exploiting their vulnerabilities was not just an opportunity for tactical kills, it was essential to maintaining momentum in the European theater. The Mustang's interception strategy became a crucial component of Allied planning, blending daring piloting with a deep understanding of enemy technology and tactics. In this environment, the sky became a high-stakes arena of anticipation and calculation. The Me-262 represented the cutting edge of speed and firepower, while the Mustangs embodied ingenuity, timing, and courage. The story that unfolds is not one of a single dogfight, but of strategic patience, mechanical insight, and the calculated exploitation of fleeting vulnerabilities. It is a story of how human skill and planning can counter even the most advanced technology. By early 1945, the Me-262 had earned its fearsome reputation, the world's first operational jet fighter, capable of outpacing any piston-engine aircraft in the skies of Europe. Once airborne, it could accelerate past 540 miles per hour, leaving even the fastest Mustangs struggling to keep pace. Its climb rate was astonishing, allowing it to reach combat altitude faster than any propeller-driven fighter. Yet these advantages were only fully realized once the jet was in motion. On the runway, the story changed dramatically. Fully loaded with fuel and ordnance, the Me-262 lumbered forward, its jet engines slow to spool up and the aircraft reluctant to lift off. In those first 10 seconds, a P-51 Mustang, though slower in the air, could accelerate with nimble efficiency, covering ground quickly and positioning itself to intercept the jet before it could exploit its top speed. What the Me-262 gained in high-altitude performance, it temporarily sacrificed on the tarmac, a vulnerability that Allied pilots learned to exploit with patience and timing. Even maneuverability played a decisive role. At takeoff, the Me-262's heavy nose, combined with its delicate swept wings and underdeveloped landing gear, made sharp evasive maneuvers nearly impossible. A Mustang pilot could anticipate the jet's flight path, approach from angles the Me-262 could not immediately counter, and bring its 6.50 caliber machine guns to bear on a target that, moments ago, had seemed untouchable. The Me-262's 30mm cannons, while devastating once aimed, were almost irrelevant in these opening moments, because the aircraft could not yet maneuver to fire effectively. This contrast between potential and circumstance, jet speed versus piston agility, firepower versus timing, became the defining narrative of Allied interceptions. The Me-262 was a predator, but only in the open sky. The Mustang, slow by comparison, became the hunter during those critical seconds of takeoff. Intelligence briefings, photographs, and careful observation allowed pilots to understand these mechanical limitations, turning what seemed like an insurmountable technological advantage into a fleeting tactical opportunity. In essence, the performance differences tell a story not through numbers, but through action. The jet's acceleration lag, engine fragility, and long takeoff distance set the stage for ambush. The Mustang's nimble response, combined with pilot skill and precise timing, transformed these mechanical disparities into strategic leverage. The sky over Europe became a theater where engineering brilliance met tactical ingenuity, and the first fatal encounters between piston and jet aircraft were written in the air. The first encounters between Me-262 jets and Allied Mustangs were like nothing pilots had ever experienced. On March 24, 1945, a squadron of Mustangs patrolled near Akmer Airfield in Germany, a location intelligence had identified as a hub for Me-262 sorties. The sun was just rising, casting long shadows across the tarmac, revealing rows of sleek jets that gleamed with a menacing allure. Each aircraft seemed designed for a single purpose: to dominate the skies with a speed and firepower unmatched by anything the Allies had faced. The Mustangs circled silently, blending with the morning haze. For the pilots, the thrill was intertwined with dread. They knew the Me-262 was untouchable once airborne, but the pre-flight moments offered a window of opportunity. A fully fueled jet, burdened by bombs or additional cannons, could not instantly accelerate. Its engines, still warming, produced a hesitant roar rather than a deafening scream. The Mustang pilots watched and waited, understanding that patience, an almost unnatural calm, would decide life or death. At precisely the right moment, the first Me-262 rumbled down the runway. Its acceleration was sluggish, a stark contrast to the bullet-like promise of speed that awaited higher altitudes. One Mustang pilot, a veteran of hundreds of missions, adjusted his throttle and banked to intercept. In that split second, he became both hunter and strategist, calculating trajectory, relative speed, and escape vectors, all while anticipating the jet's first attempts at evasive maneuvers. In several engagements during this period, the pattern repeated. The Me-262 lifted off slowly, struggling under its own weight and the limitations of early turbojet engines. The Mustangs, using superior low-speed maneuverability, could position themselves advantageously, often coming up from the side or slightly below, the angles from which the jet's heavy nose and limited early control surfaces could not respond effectively. Pilots later recounted that these first moments were always the most dangerous. The air seemed to vibrate with tension, each decision a gamble, each misjudgment potentially fatal. One striking case involved a formation of 4 Me-262s departing Nordholz airfield. The Mustangs had already identified the jet's typical timing patterns from reconnaissance photos and previous sorties. As the first 262 struggled into the air, a Mustang pilot dived from slightly higher altitude, matching speed with the jet as it began to gain momentum. The pilot recalled the surreal sensation. The Me-262's nose pitched up sluggishly, the tail heavy and hesitant, the engines whining in protest. It was as if the machine itself were aware of its temporary vulnerability. Within seconds, the Mustang's guns were trained, and bursts of .50 caliber rounds forced the jet into evasive maneuvers it was poorly equipped to execute at such low speed. The psychological element was equally critical. Me-262 pilots, trained to trust in their machine's invincibility, suddenly faced attackers who had studied their every limitation. The effect was often disorienting. One German pilot, in a post-war memoir, admitted that seeing a Mustang appear from an unexpected angle during takeoff shattered his confidence in the aircraft's untouchability. For the Allied pilots, this was validation of rigorous training, reconnaissance, and patience. They had turned a legend into a tangible target. Strategically, these engagements also revealed how human calculation could exploit mechanical limits. Early jet engines required careful throttle management to prevent failure, particularly at low altitude and full load. Every aggressive maneuver risked destroying the turbine, a vulnerability the Mustang pilots exploited indirectly. By forcing the 262 into evasive action prematurely, they increased stress on the engines without firing a shot. Coupled with the aircraft's long takeoff roll, this approach minimized Mustang exposure to high-speed pursuit while maximizing the jet's operational risk. Beyond single engagements, patterns emerged that shaped Allied interception doctrine. Airfields were studied for layout, runway orientation, and enemy crew behavior. Mustangs would patrol in holding patterns, often at slightly higher altitude, minimizing visibility until the jets began their roll. They timed their dives with surgical precision, coordinating multiple aircraft to converge simultaneously. This ensured that even the momentary advantage of early acceleration was countered by numbers, positioning, and the natural nimbleness of piston fighters. The combination of mechanical insight, reconnaissance, and tactical patience culminated in several notable interceptions. On one occasion near Lek Airfield, a group of 3 Mustangs effectively trapped 2 Me-262s during takeoff. The jets struggled to lift off fully, their engines lagging, while the Mustangs closed in from different vectors. One pilot described the sensation as almost cinematic. The jets were supposed to be untouchable, yet in that fleeting, tense window, they were suddenly exposed, vulnerable, and within the lethal reach of the Mustang pilots' guns. It was not brute force alone that led to success but calculated timing. The pilots did not dive recklessly. They allowed gravity and positioning to do part of the work. The slow acceleration of the jets created a natural choreography for interception, an interplay of physics and human anticipation. The Mustang became more than a plane. It became an instrument of patience, intelligence, and opportunistic precision, converting the Me-262's extraordinary speed into a momentary liability. Another engagement, near Parkham Airfield, illustrated the deadly choreography between jet and piston fighter. Intelligence had indicated that a flight of Me-262s would depart around 7:30. The Mustangs, aware of the pattern, arrived minutes earlier to hold in the clouds above the runway. For the Allied pilots, the tension was tangible. Every engine hum, every silhouette of ground crew activity, signaled the approach of their quarry. As the first Me-262 rumbled onto the runway, the Mustang pilot adjusted throttle and banked slightly, exploiting the jet's slow acceleration. The 262's nose pitched upward cautiously, wings flexing under the load of fuel and armament. In this brief window, the Mustang could maneuver with a responsiveness the jet could not yet match. Bullets from the .50 caliber machine guns found their mark, and the jet pilot was forced into immediate evasive action, engines straining. The difference in design philosophy was stark. The Me-262 optimized for raw speed, the Mustang for adaptability and human-scale reaction. The third jet in the formation experienced a more dramatic lesson. Burdened with extra cannon rounds and bombs, its engines lagged even further, allowing 2 Mustangs to converge from both flanks. The jet pilot attempted a sharp climb to escape, but the initial momentum deficit meant the aircraft was sluggish, nearly predictable in its flight path. One Mustang's pilot recalled, "For a moment, it seemed surreal. The plane that was supposed to be untouchable was dancing exactly where we wanted it." It was a demonstration of timing, mechanical understanding, and nerves, rather than sheer aerial superiority. In a separate incident over rain, Mustangs executed what pilots called a double-dip interception. 2 Me-262s took off in close succession, with engines still under strain. One Mustang engaged the lead jet, forcing evasive maneuvers, while a second Mustang targeted the trailing jet in the confusion. The pilot's coordination and understanding of jet limitations, particularly the delayed throttle response and engine fragility, proved decisive. German post-war accounts confirmed that pilots often had no choice but to abort missions or risk engine failure when pushed too hard immediately after takeoff. These encounters also highlighted the human factor. Mustangs relied not only on maneuverability but also on split-second calculation and anticipation. The pilots understood that the Me-262's advantage was contextual. It existed primarily once the jet reached cruising speed. Below that threshold, the mechanical reality of early jet engines, heavy landing gear, and long takeoff rolls transformed the Predator into a temporarily vulnerable target. In personal diaries, several Mustang pilots described the sensation as a blend of adrenaline and awe, watching the sleek jet struggle to leave the ground, knowing that minutes ago, these machines had seemed invincible. Strategically, these engagements forced changes in Luftwaffe operations. To mitigate vulnerability, German pilots experimented with staggered takeoffs, rapid engine warm-up, and increased maintenance checks. Still, the fundamental limitations of early jet engines meant that any departure under full load retained inherent risk. Allied commanders seized on this, refining tactics to exploit predictable weaknesses rather than relying on chance encounters. The result was an air campaign where intelligence, anticipation, and technical understanding became as decisive as aerial gunnery. One particularly intense encounter occurred near the airfield at Berg, where a group of 4 Mustangs awaited a known Me-262 sortie. The jets, heavily armed for bomber interception, were delayed on the runway due to fuel calibration issues. The Mustangs, positioned for maximum interception advantage, descended in a synchronized dive. For the briefest moments, the Me-262s were exposed in all their engineered perfection, engines whining under load, wings flexing, noses heavy. The Mustangs struck with precision, forcing evasive maneuvers that tested the jet's early acceleration limits. Historians later noted that without the Mustangs' patience and tactical exploitation, these sorties could have resulted in catastrophic losses for Allied bomber formations. Even beyond direct engagements, the psychological impact was significant. Mustangs forced German pilots to rethink their approach, instilling caution and altering sortie patterns. The early success of takeoff interceptions demonstrated a critical principle of air warfare. Technology may define potential, but strategy and timing often dictate outcome. The human element, anticipation, patience, and coordination, proved capable of neutralizing what initially seemed unassailable. By late April 1945, these tactics had become standard. Mustangs no longer relied on luck or spontaneous opportunity. Every sortie was calculated with reconnaissance, weather conditions, and anticipated Me-262 performance in mind. Pilots knew that speed alone did not win battles. Understanding the mechanical and operational realities of the enemy's aircraft transformed vulnerability into opportunity. In multiple documented cases, this meticulous approach allowed Mustangs to down or disrupt jets without entering high-speed dogfights where the Me-262's raw velocity would dominate. As the spring of 1945 progressed, the cumulative effect of these interceptions became evident. Me-262 pilots, once confident in the untouchability of their jets, now approached sorties with caution. Multiple documented cases show that even the most experienced Luftwaffe aces hesitated during takeoff, calculating angles, throttle management, and potential Mustang positions. One pilot recounted, "The takeoff became a moment of dread rather than triumph. Every shadow, every movement on the tarmac demanded vigilance." This psychological shift reflected the deadly effectiveness of well-timed piston fighters exploiting mechanical vulnerabilities. In another engagement near Furstenberg, 2 Me-262s attempted simultaneous takeoffs. The first struggled to gain altitude, engines whining under full load. A Mustang, positioned slightly above and behind, executed a dive that forced the jet into a high-angle climb, further straining the fragile turbojets. The trailing 262, witnessing its comrade's struggle, attempted an evasive maneuver that overtaxed its engine, creating smoke and a temporary loss of control. By the time both jets cleared the immediate danger zone, the Mustang pilots had already calculated pursuit vectors, choosing to disengage rather than risk a prolonged high-speed chase, understanding that the jet's top-end speed would make any sustained attack futile. These encounters illustrated a recurring principle. The Me-262's performance advantage was situational. Above a certain speed and altitude, it was nearly untouchable. Below that, every mechanical limitation became a tactical liability. Engine lag during takeoff, the inertia of heavy landing gear, and the momentary sluggishness of a fully loaded fuselage provided just enough time for Mustang pilots to position themselves, open fire, and exploit the jet's constrained maneuverability. The narrative is clear. Technology sets the potential, but strategy determines its realization. A particularly notable case involved a sortie near Akmer where 4 Me-262s attempted to intercept an incoming bomber formation. Mustangs patrolling the perimeter had anticipated the jet's departure windows. As the 262s began their takeoff rolls, the Mustangs descended in a coordinated sweep. One jet, heavily loaded with 30mm cannon rounds, barely cleared the runway before being engaged. The Mustang pilot described the engagement as almost surreal. The jet's acceleration was elegant but painfully slow, the engine straining, wings flexing, nose heavy. The Mustang's approach leveraged every fraction of a second, positioning to force evasive maneuvers that further tested the 262's fragile engines. Only 2 jets made it fully airborne without damage, underscoring how even a marginal tactical advantage could determine survival. Historical analysis also highlights how these engagements shaped pilot behavior on both sides. Me-262 pilots became acutely aware of the risks associated with takeoff, leading to staggered departures, extended warm-ups, and cautious throttle management. Conversely, Mustang pilots honed their interception timing, altitude positioning, and approach angles. Every sortie became an exercise in anticipating mechanical limitations and exploiting them, physics and engineering intertwined with human judgment. Patience was the deadliest weapon, one Mustang veteran later recalled. It wasn't just marksmanship or raw speed, it was understanding that the jet, despite its unprecedented capabilities, had windows of vulnerability that could be predicted, measured, and exploited. The interplay between engine lag, acceleration under load, and takeoff roll transformed what appeared to be a technological imbalance into a series of calculable engagements. Even minor environmental factors influenced outcomes. Crosswinds could delay rotation, morning fog concealed interceptor positions, and runway conditions affected acceleration. Allied pilots integrated these variables into their planning, treating each sortie like a chess game, where predicting the Me-262's mechanical and operational responses was as crucial as aiming weapons. These refinements transformed chance encounters into reliable tactical opportunities, ensuring that the Mustang, slower in top speed, could consistently challenge the jet during vulnerable moments. By late April 1945, the air campaign demonstrated a clear pattern. Jets were not invincible. Human strategy could exploit every mechanical limit. Each successful interception reinforced doctrine, reshaping Luftwaffe and Allied tactics alike. Me-262s remained formidable, but their perceived untouchability had been broken, not through technology alone, but through precise understanding of engineering constraints, patience, and calculated timing. The lessons from these engagements were profound. The story of Mustang pilots intercepting Me-262s is not merely about speed or firepower. It is about observation, anticipation, and turning enemy strengths into weaknesses. It illustrates a fundamental principle of air combat. No matter how revolutionary the technology, understanding its limitations and designing tactics to exploit them often dictates the outcome. In these fleeting seconds on the runway and in the first moments of flight, the seemingly untouchable became vulnerable, the predator exposed to the cunning of a well-prepared adversary. The engagements between Me-262 jets and Allied Mustangs left a lasting mark on both sides of the conflict, shaping tactical thinking, aircraft design, and the broader understanding of air power. For the Luftwaffe, the Me-262's operational history demonstrated that revolutionary technology alone could not secure victory. Despite the jet's unmatched speed and firepower, its mechanical limitations, particularly during takeoff and low-speed maneuvers, rendered it vulnerable to a patient and calculated adversary. Commanders faced the sobering realization that technological superiority could be neutralized by human ingenuity, precise timing, and disciplined execution. The psychological impact on German pilots was profound. Where once the Me-262 symbolized invincibility, the repeated success of Mustang interceptions instilled caution, hesitation, and a heightened awareness of vulnerability. Post-war memoirs recount how aces adapted, delaying takeoffs, staggering sorties, and meticulously managing throttle to minimize exposure. Yet these adjustments could only partially compensate for inherent mechanical constraints. In operational terms, the jet was formidable but never invulnerable, a lesson that underscored the interplay between engineering marvels and practical application under combat conditions. For Allied forces, these engagements validated the effectiveness of intelligence, reconnaissance, and tactical patience. Mustangs, often considered technologically inferior in raw speed, leveraged predictable windows of Me-262 vulnerability to neutralize a seemingly unstoppable threat. The campaigns demonstrated that thorough analysis of enemy capabilities, combined with disciplined execution, could level the playing field against advanced technology. Pilots learned to observe, anticipate, and exploit, turning mechanical limitations into strategic opportunities. This principle extended beyond the immediate theater, informing post-war doctrines that emphasized adaptability over pure technological advantage. The engagements also had far-reaching implications for aircraft design. Engineers and military planners recognized that speed alone could not dictate aerial dominance. The Me-262's design, while revolutionary, highlighted the importance of balancing raw performance with reliability, maneuverability, and operational flexibility. Subsequent jet development incorporated lessons learned from these encounters: the necessity for rapid acceleration at takeoff, robust engine design, and integration with tactical doctrine. The human element, pilot decision-making and timing, was understood as an inseparable factor in achieving full operational potential. Beyond technology, the encounters influenced broader strategic thinking. Air superiority was no longer simply a matter of producing the fastest or most heavily armed aircraft. Commanders needed to account for vulnerabilities inherent in all platforms, integrating intelligence, environmental awareness, and human skill into operational planning. In practice, the Mustang's exploitation of Me-262 takeoff limitations illustrated how superior knowledge and timing could counteract superior speed, a principle that would resonate throughout Cold War-era air strategy and beyond. The legacy of these engagements is also cultural and educational. They provided compelling case studies in how perceived invincibility could be challenged, offering enduring lessons for pilots, strategists, and engineers alike. Military academies around the world now examine these confrontations to teach the importance of analyzing enemy capabilities, exploiting weaknesses, and combining technological innovation with disciplined human execution. The story of the Mustang versus the Me-262 has become a paradigmatic example of adaptive warfare. Even the most advanced tools are constrained by physics, circumstance, and the creativity of those who face them. Furthermore, these battles shaped post-war narratives of air combat heroism and ingenuity. Mustangs, despite their comparative limitations in speed, became celebrated for turning disadvantage into tactical advantage. The engagements emphasized that skill, patience, and coordination could outweigh raw technical superiority, a lesson that continues to inform modern fighter pilot training. Equally, the Me-262's operational history cautions against over-reliance on technological breakthroughs without accounting for operational realities, a warning that resonates in discussions of modern fifth-generation fighters and unmanned combat platforms. From a strategic perspective, the temporary windows of vulnerability during takeoff, the slow engine spool-up, and heavy landing gear all highlighted the interdependence of machine and human operator. These vulnerabilities dictated doctrine, engagement rules, and mission planning. Allied forces refined techniques for intercepting jets, while the Luftwaffe scrambled to adjust flight schedules and sortie patterns, often with limited success. Each success or failure shaped subsequent planning, demonstrating that even revolutionary technology is only as effective as the tactics, training, and timing that support it. The long-term impact extended into post-war aircraft development philosophy. Designers began to prioritize operational flexibility, low-speed handling, and reliability alongside top-end performance. The Me-262's story informed an understanding that a purely speed-centric design might yield spectacular results under ideal conditions, but could fail catastrophically if environmental, mechanical, or tactical factors were misjudged. In short, the lessons of these engagements influenced not only combat doctrine but the very way engineers approached aviation design in the jet age. Finally, the engagements between Me-262s and Mustangs illustrate a timeless principle of warfare. Technology sets potential, but human ingenuity, observation, and timing define reality. The seemingly untouchable jet was brought into a momentary, deadly vulnerability by pilots who understood its limits. These encounters remind us that mastery of context, whether mechanical, environmental, or psychological, is as decisive as mastery of machinery. It is a lesson echoed in military history across centuries, and one that continues to resonate in discussions of air power, tactical innovation, and the enduring interplay between man and machine. The story of the Me-262 and the Mustang is more than a tale of speed and firepower. It is a testament to the interplay between human ingenuity, technological innovation, and tactical insight. The Me-262, with its revolutionary jet engines and heavy armament, symbolized the cutting edge of aviation. Yet its very brilliance exposed inherent vulnerabilities, particularly during the vulnerable moments of takeoff and initial climb. The Mustang, slower and less intimidating on paper, transformed understanding of the enemy into decisive action, exploiting every mechanical limitation with patience, timing, and precision. What we learn from these encounters is profound. No matter how advanced a machine appears, its potential is constrained by circumstance, operational limitations, and the ingenuity of those who confront it. The Mustang pilot's success was not the result of luck, nor of brute force alone. It was the careful application of observation, planning, and execution. They turned moments of vulnerability into opportunities, transforming apparent disadvantage into tactical superiority. In a way, the story reminds us that strategy and human skill remain the ultimate multipliers of technology. For modern audiences, the narrative carries both historical and contemporary resonance. It demonstrates how critical understanding your enemy is, mechanically, operationally, and psychologically. Every takeoff, every maneuver, every calculated dive became a microcosm of decision-making under pressure, revealing that even a legendary aircraft like the Me-262 could be challenged when human foresight and disciplined execution intersected with mechanical reality. These lessons are timeless, applicable not only in historical analysis but also in modern air combat simulations, strategic planning, and engineering design philosophies. As we reflect on these events, it is impossible not to feel the tension, the adrenaline, and the high stakes of every engagement. Imagine a Mustang pilot circling above a German airfield, waiting for the telltale roar of jet engines to rise, knowing that in just seconds the line between life and death will be defined by timing, positioning, and skill. That cinematic tension is precisely what makes this story ideal for exploration in video format, allowing viewers to feel the suspense, understand the stakes, and appreciate the depth of strategy and ingenuity involved. If you've enjoyed following this narrative, and want to explore more stories where strategy, human skill, and technology collide in history's most gripping moments, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Each video dives deep into historical battles, engineering marvels, and personal accounts from the front lines, bringing the past vividly to life. Your support ensures we can continue producing these cinematic explorations of history. In closing, the tale of the Me-262 and the Mustang leaves us with enduring lessons. Understand your tools, know your opponent, and never underestimate the power of patience and precision. Even the most formidable technology can be countered with insight and preparation. These confrontations remind us that while machines define potential, it is human skill, timing, and strategic thinking that ultimately define outcomes. The Mustang pilots proved that even the untouchable could be challenged, and in doing so, they wrote a story that continues to captivate, instruct, and inspire generations of aviators, historians, and enthusiasts alike. So next time you watch a jet streak across the sky, remember that history is full of lessons hidden in those fleeting seconds of takeoff and maneuver, the same seconds where the course of battles, and sometimes entire campaigns, can be decided. And for more cinematic explorations of these moments, make sure to like, comment, and share this video, so the story of human ingenuity versus technological marvels reaches even more viewers.